Hey guys, welcome again to the Detour Live. We've had one stage of the Giro done and dusted, as we like to say in the classics. I'm your host, Dan Jones. I'm joined, as always, by four-time national road champion Johnny Trevorrow, Olympic gold medalist Scott McGrory. Guys, before we bring in Matt White, what were your takeaways from last night, Iffy?
Well, Gunner is not a gunner, is he? He's the real deal. I mean, we all thought he would win, although he hadn't shown that form this year. But on his home roads, he really set himself for it, and he just killed them. I mean, he was 10 seconds faster than anyone else. So, he was the man.
Scooter?
Well, I remember last year, the Giro, which obviously interrupted season, all that kind of stuff, but he was incredible. He was doing stuff. Obviously, in the time trials last year, he was amazing, world champion as well. But it was, in particular, it was a hilly road stage last year that he won, and that shocked everybody, just how this big fella, full of power, then could get over some hills as well. So, yeah, standout time trial. He's, it goes in steps, it goes in generations. Your Tony Martins and your Cancellara's. It was only Rowan Dennis a couple of years ago that was almost unbeatable. And now it's Gunner. It's his time to shine, and he's incredible. And the favourite, obviously, for the Olympic Games time trial later this year as well.
Oh, well, that's exactly right. But it was just only 2 weeks ago. He wasn't showing that sort of form. Even a week ago, he was getting rolled comfortably. Rowan Dennis was back to his best. And Cavagna, the Frenchman, who, I thought it was going to be a race out of two of them, but Cavagna didn't step up last night. But Gunner was, He
I heard the UCI paid Gunner just to slow down in a couple of time trials, just to make it look a bit fairer for everybody.
Yeah, type of thing they do.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what a bookie would do. Anyway, let's chat to the man on the ground, and that's Team Bike Exchange Head Sports Director Matt White. Whitey, are you happy with the day for the time trial?
Definitely. Look, it's one of those days that you want to get through unscathed, and nothing in the big picture of 90 hours of racing and 3,500 kilometres, 4 or 5 seconds is neither here nor there. And someone put out some good power yesterday, and it was one box ticked and 20 more to go.
Now, this is an interesting one. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but in his warm-up a few hours earlier, he almost got brought down by a bloody squirrel. I mean, it ran right in front of him in the warm-up. And evidently there's some vision of it that you guys have got that I haven't seen yet, but it was pretty close. Were you in the car?
Oh, I was not. I was because we're on the circuit, but I wasn't directly behind Simon at the time. But a big chunk of that time trial yesterday was in Parkland, right on the river in Turin. And you're right. A squirrel came scurried across the road, and Simon only barely missed running it over. It was small enough where I don't know if it would have done too much damage to Simon, but you need a little bit of luck. And if you guys saw overnight that Chris Nederlands from Israel, he actually was riding home from the time trial yesterday, had an accident, broke his collarbone, and won't be starting this morning.
Yes, I did hear that. That's terrible news for them.
Matt, you know what that's like. Go back to the Tour de France, how devastating it can be. When you almost started the Tour that year, warming up for the prologue. Take us through that.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I don't remember too much of it there, Scotty. I didn't have a helmet on, and I woke up in hospital in Liège. But accidents do happen. But you've just got to. There's some things you can control, and some things not, and like anything in life, you need a little bit of luck. But for Israel, that would be pretty devastating because he was probably Dan Martin's only support really in the mountains, and he's gone before the race has even started.
Now, Johnny, when I saw you excited to ask the first question of Whitey, I thought you were going to throw in the jab about how his netball coaching is going.
Well, that was going to be the next thing. What are your netball skills actually like? Because the big surprise for me was Evenepoel in the top 10, only seconds behind a few of the other real hitters. And, I mean, 10K time trial was never his real forte, so that was very impressive.
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised with his form in the time trial. you're looking at a guy. We're talking about the favourites for the Olympics. I actually would put the young fella down as my number one favourite for Tokyo, just because it's quite an undulating TT, and I think Ghana will. It's going to be tricky for him managing training for the teams pursuit and a 1 hour effort at the same time. Whereas I think Evenepoel will use this Giro d'Italia as his real foundation for the summer, and he'll be able to train specifically for the time trial. But I see those two and Rowan Dennis as probably the three favourites for Tokyo. But I'm not surprised. Look, I don't think there's any issue with his fitness, and he's when Rowan won his last world title in Yorkshire, the podium was Rowan, Evenepoel, and Gunnar. So I'm not surprised. This young fellow is an incredible athlete, but the 3 weeks is what more concerns me, since he hasn't raced for 9 months and the preparation he has had. But yeah, no surprise, he's a world class athlete, and a short intense effort like that's going to suit a young fella.
Yeah. I just wasn't saying you should just be careful. You just brush up on your netballing skills. That's all.
Is this the most hype rider you've seen for a young rider in a while? Like, I mean, they're building this guy up, as you said yesterday. He hasn't done a Grand Tour, but I mean, what has brought all of this on?
I think it's part desperation. I think there has been a lot of people who have been sold as the next Eddie Merckx, and this is number about 25 in the last 25 years. But look, talking to Lorenzo in Belgium, he's saying it's just incredible the publicity he's getting in Belgium. Like, it's just mainstream news. It's a lead story in Belgium that he's starting the Giro and he's back chasing the Giro victory, and this is all about a 21-year-old who's never done a Grand Tour. And I think even with the bookies, he's odds-on favourite. For a guy who's never done a race over 7 days, and coming off the equal second favourite preparation that he's had.
Well, he's probably crunched after that one effort too.
Well, he's got his own clothing brand in Belgium. And,
what?
He's huge.
He's and look, by the sounds of it, I've had nothing to do with the kid, but by the sounds of it, he doesn't mind a bit of pressure. I think he puts a fair bit on himself. But they would be they're pretty big boots to fill, Eddie Merckx's, and as we know, it hasn't gone that well for a lot of locals since the 80s, has it? So there's only been one Eddie Merckx, but he's certainly a very, very talented kid, and what he's done already in his 2.5-year career is pretty astounding. Seeing as the kid 4 years ago was the captain of the Belgium under-17 football team.
Scooter.
Look, and there won't be another Merckx, not simply because Merckx was the greatest, but it's just different eras, isn't it? And the riders back then, like Eddie, rode everything the entire season, and everybody was tired at the end of the year. There was the fresh legs weren't there, people weren't so specific, training wasn't quite as specific, so I don't think anyone could match the Palmares of someone like a Merckx. But what really struck me last year is when he crashed in Lombardia. Before the crash, in a couple of climbs before that, it was incredible to see a team like De Koenig absolutely laying everything on the line to make that race as hard as possible in the lead up to the final couple of hills for this kid. That's how much confidence they had in him in that race last year. And it was, you have to go back a little while to see a Giro de Lombardia or Il Lombardia that was with such a small group coming into the last several hills, and they even weren't waiting for the last one to go crunch because they were tearing it apart for Remco. That's the confidence they had in him. And then, of course, he crashed out and we haven't seen him since. One of the things that was interesting for me, Whitey, was I interviewed Victor Campenaerts recently, and he was talking about how he knew he was going to break the world hour record, held by Sir Bradley Wiggins, which looks, when you look at the numbers, it was pretty scary, 54 k's an hour. He was totally convinced he was going to break it 3 months before, simply because of all the data and all the error testing. Everything indicated that he was going to be able to do that and sustain it over an hour and break the record. So that's the confidence he took into it. And I think that's the kind of data and understanding of Remco's stats and everything, all the watts that he's putting out, that the team just back him and think, well, you know what, he's putting out phenomenal numbers that perhaps isn't, we're not his testing data and his results, etc. But I guess they're looking at saying this guy he's one out of the box.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think
and confidence breeds confidence, doesn't it? And they are a winning team, traditionally a classics sprint oriented team, but they definitely see that he signed a 5-year deal, which Patrick Lefevre in the last 30 years has never signed anyone to that length of contract, and they are going to build the team around him over the next 5 years.
and if you've got your own product line of shirts, jocks, and socks, I mean, you got to back the guy. And that's confidence. Hey,
come on, Johnsy.
Yeah, big champion, eh? He's a good guy too, I hear. Good guy. Who of all the GC guys surprised you? Was there any one that you were like, ooh, like Almeida was obviously a good ride, but anyone else?
Yeah, no. I think when you look at last year's Giro, Almeida was 4th overall, but I think he was 4th or 5th on the last stage time trial. And he had a belter of a time trial in the middle of the Giro last year. So even though he's only 2nd-year professional, he is his speciality is definitely time trialing. So that's no surprise. I think there's within 5 to 10 seconds of us is every GC rider except Blasov and Almeida. And then I suppose we had a couple of guys didn't have the best time trials. Bardet and Dan Martin were the other GC guys who didn't have super time trials yesterday. But besides that, you could throw a blanket over the real contenders yesterday.
I actually like that they opened the Giro with such a short sort of effort to keep it close, and that there isn't these sort of big time gaps. And, it definitely keeps the suspense going where, you haven't got those early blowouts.
Yeah,
probably.
I would have preferred a team's time trial, but but yeah, I agree. If there'd been a 25k individual time trial yesterday, and even a long team's time trial, which we don't see these days in cycling anyway, you've got teams at 2 to 3 minutes straight away. So it does change the dynamic of the racing. And these first 2 days of the Giro, touch wood, pretty straightforward stages. We've got great weather today. Pretty much one direction all day, and tomorrow is a bit trickier, but there's rain forecast for tomorrow. But we don't have to wait too long before our GC showdown on Tuesday, that's for sure.
What about transfers, Whitey? I know the Giro is notorious for having super long transfers between stages, and often, I know last year there was a lot of complaints about it, and obviously you all get to look at what it is, and it's not until you're really in the middle of it, middle of the second week, into the third week, when you're actually in the middle of doing these long transfers, where it really hits home sometimes, and people start to really get pissed off about it. How does it look this year?
Look, I've done a few Giros over the years, Scotty, and I really have become desensitized to the transfer. I think if you are someone who is really particular with getting into certain routines at night time or in the mornings, then I think the Giro is probably not the race to come to. There is some really long days. There'll be days in the last week there you'll be leaving the hotel at 8 o'clock and arriving at the hotel at 8:30, 9 o'clock. But it's not too bad. This year we stay all in Italy, beside the little skirmish into Switzerland, on a stage, a border, and a stage into Slovenia. But there is no real big transfers. And I know 10 or 15 years ago it was pretty epic. Some of the transfers you'd have 200k after the stage, stuff like that. 3 hours after a stage, so you're arriving at the hotel at 8:30. But look, it's not too bad, and it's the guys are getting the technology we've got now. The recovery process for these guys starts on the bus with the boots, and the bus is a very comfortable place to be. We did a recon the day before we got on the way here on the Wednesday, and it was a long day, but it was worth seeing. And the guys spent 6 hours in the bus going from the finish of the recon to the hotel here in Turin. But no, they can they can eat, they can walk around. There's a bathroom there. They've got big seats, like sitting in your room watching television. So there is some late nights and some early starts, but that's the Giro. And if you're super anal with that sort of stuff, it's a difficult race. But it's the same for everyone. And I think more the complaints last year was when the riders had that silly strike there at the last minute with the 265 kilometre stage 19. Those sort of stages probably not as necessary, not really that necessary. We got a 230k this year to break up the two mountain blocks in the last week, but you get the same sort of results if you have 180k, and probably get a more exciting race the shorter it is. But at the end of the day, it's his business, and they are linking towns who are paying for starts and finish areas, and it's all part of the circuits that we know is professional cycling.
Have you found, Whitey, since 2020 that riders and staff can play more or less? Has it given them a bit more perspective and you can pull the whole, hey, at least we're racing, guys, pull your head in?
Well, a big chunk of the majority of my staff here are Italian. So there's no way they're going to say a negative thing about this race. This is like this is the Tour Down Under for them. This is their biggest for us. This is their biggest race. This is what the most exciting race for them to be part of. So they're not going to say about take them to the Tour de France to have a long transfer. That's a different story. Yeah, but the riders now they're used to it, and like realistically, the transfers that we've experienced over the last couple of years have been a lot better than what we experienced 10 years ago.
Yep. Iffy?
Yeah, I was just going to say today we've got a real sprint day. I was looking at something Caleb said the other day that he reckons it's going to be chaotic because most of the teams haven't brought they've got some good sprinters here, but they haven't got teams around them that are just designated for them. So, there's probably only Lotto with Caleb and maybe for Viviani with Cofidis. They're the only teams that really that are going to be able to sort of try and lead out. The rest of them have only got smaller teams, so they can't be going from 10K out. So in the last 5K, it's going to be very chaotic. What are your thoughts on that, Whitey?
Oh, 100%. And because everyone's fresh at day one, everyone thinks they're a sprinter on day one of a Grand Tour, don't they? and then you get all the GC teams like us annoying them by trying to ride decent position and keep our leader just out of trouble. But I agree with Caleb. I think his team is very much designated to him and nothing else. And I would see him as the favourite for today's stage. But it's a pretty straightforward stage today. It's not so technical a run-in. And, it'll be an early break. It'll be controlled by, we've got 6 teams with realistically with good sprinters here. It'll be pretty steady stage today. It's a lot of head crosswind until the last couple of kilometres, and then you're in town, and quite a straightforward run-in as well. So I would see Caleb as the favourite today, and the GC teams will just be trying to stay out of trouble and get their rider inside the last 3K.
Yeah, Johnny, you mentioned Viviani and Cofidis. Obviously, Viviani normally would be a man to maybe push Caleb for the sprint wins. He just hasn't been quite the Viviani of, say, a year and a half ago. But his team, Whitey, Cofidis, I wouldn't be confident that they'd be able to control the end of a stage for him as a sprint. I think he's going to be more of a freelancer towards the end. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it hasn't. Look, I think coming from the old wolf pack with the likes of Morkov. Like Morkov for me, he's the world's best lead-out rider, and unfortunately for Viviani, Morkov was under contract and couldn't come with him to Cofidis, and he brought Sabatini and Consoni, which Consoni's a great young rider, a great world-class track rider, but with limited experience on the road. And I think Sabatini is, all respect to him, was a very, very good lead-out guy, but I think we've probably seen the best of him as well. And I think changing teams, Cofidis, to be honest, Cofidis haven't got a culture of winning sprints. And I think that's quite hard just to copy and paste and bring 1 or 2 guys and pop them in a team that hasn't got that culture of winning, and it certainly hasn't clicked. He's only won 1 race in a year and a half, and I hope he can win something here for him and Cofidis because they put a lot of effort and money into bringing him across. But I would definitely don't see him as one of the favourites today.
Well, didn't Buani? He won a few sprints, didn't he, for Cofidis?
Yeah, a lot of French Cups. He put Michael Matthews into the barricades in Paris.
Couple of good fights.
Couple of good fights. Yeah, and then he left. Remember, he left quite quick, and he was in FDJ. Then he went to Cofidis. Didn't last too long there, and then he moved on. Now he's in Arkea / MMBA. Fighting in his part time, didn't he?
Yeah, he gave someone a good hayfield handshake at a hotel once, didn't he?
The night before nationals, he wasn't too happy with the noise coming down the hallway, had a
That's
few
it.
words to the local guests, and boxed on, broke his hand, didn't start the Nationals. Yeah.
That's it. As you do. Hey, we've got a couple of comments. Wendy Superfan. Hi, Dan, John, Scott. She obviously
Hi,
logged that.
Wendy.
Oh, no, sorry. Hi, Matt. There you go.
Wendy,
Samantha says, how do you think Sagan will go, fellas? What do you think, Whitey?
very good. Very good. He's coming into a rich vein of form. He was very good in Romney, jagged a good win there. And he looks big at the moment, which means he's probably going pretty powerful. I don't think he's probably as much of a threat on the finishes that he used to in the past, those sort of medium mountain stages. But he's a winner, and he's got his mojo back. And there's also obviously a lot of talk around the traps where he's going next year. So I think he'll find a home. That won't be a problem. But where that is, and I think unless he's signed his contract already, and not a win or two in the Giro won't do any harm to the value of his next couple of year contract.
Well, just talking on that, I mean, is there going to be a shift from dumping a whole heap of money on these marquee guys as opposed to going for the younger guys and trying to get them at a good rate and lock them into sort of 4 or 5 years?
All depends on the security of your sponsors. All depends who you've got. All depends on the availability of those guys. I think what's changed for us for the sport since Sagan came along in the last year and a half or 2 years is we've got these young guys, Bernal, Pogacar, and then the two superstars from cyclocross, Van Aert and Van der Poel. And so when Sagan came on the scene, he was a real refreshing edge for the sport, wasn't he? He was besides the fact he was a winner, but he was could do his tricks. He was winning with style. He was doing some crazy salutes, and he's a funny guy in a quirky way. And but I think we're in a really good place in the sport. We've got a lot of stars in our sport now, young and some different guys coming from cyclocross, and we've got a lot of guys with character floating around the bunch at the moment. I think it's only great for the sport in general.
Has it really?
Yes, sorry, I was going to say I'll be really interested to see where he goes because Specialized love him and they're going to want to they're prepared to put a bit of money in, I suppose. But he is on a huge money, and I don't know who's going to be able to pay that sort of funds for him for next year.
Yeah, for sure, and maybe at the end of towards the twilight of his career. He wants to be on just an environment that he wants to win on and finish off with some more big wins. And maybe that's the same team he's on. Maybe he's looking for a change. Who knows? But one thing for sure, Peter Sagan's not finished, and he's going to have an impact on this Giro, no doubt.
You saw when Tinkoff come on and started paying massive money for the big GC guys, and that really inflated the prices of those sort of riders. Has there been an inflation of prices for these young guys now because all the teams are wanting to sign them up? You've got these 19, 20-year-old kids. So if someone's got the numbers, particularly coming from Australia, every team wants them. So the prices you're paying almost double or triple what you would 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, that's definitely true, Jonesy. And I think let's hope that the trend doesn't continue the same because otherwise we're going to turn into European football or soccer where, there's the haves and the have-nots. And when you look at football across Europe, there's certain teams that are dominating and a lot of that just boils down to cash if you can buy the talent. And I think fans in general people like competition. People don't like seeing the same people win all the time. And I think I'm still a big fan of some kind of salary cap in cycling. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but I think it is certain the sport is going that way. And when one person or one or two teams start overpaying other teams, you've either got to follow or bow out or use sort of a moneyball system and go after that talent that maybe there's someone who's coming out of a big team who didn't get on there, something hasn't clicked, people coming back from injuries, whatever that may be, and get them at a cheaper rate because at the moment, there's a few big teams in our sport who certainly have bottomless pockets, and that does drive the price up of young guys, old guys, or whoever they want.
What about also capping how many riders a manager can manage? Because this is also an issue. If you've got a rider manager who's got 60 riders, well, they can inflate the price because they're playing them all off each other.
That's been happening for years anyway, mate. But I think I like the salary cap. like a salary cap idea with an idea you could have a certain amount of marquee riders that you could pay whatever. So you don't end up with a situation. And look, in Australia, in the A-League, has that sort of a salary cap. They have a total salary cap for the team, and you can have marquee players, an international player, a marquee Australian, and it just keeps the level playing field across the board, because cycling hasn't got a draft system like American professional sports do, and I think the draft system works very well in sports where there's a lot of depth, and we're talking basketball, NFL. It works really well there, and it works very well actually in AFL because you've got the numbers of players to do it. And I think cycling, our second division system and our development system isn't set up in a way that we could do a draft system at the moment. So, but I think something would be handy if they change some rules there to make it a little bit more level playing field. But until then, you're dealing with what you've got and trying to win with the resources that are available to you.
Scooter, sorry, I've cut you off the last 2 questions, mate. Off you go.
2 questions. He's had his hand up for 3 or 4 minutes, mate.
I thought you wanted to go to the toilet. You can go to the toilet, mate. It's not an issue.
Well, there's so many questions ago now that it's almost irrelevant. No, I was going to say, so the Moneyball situation worked well for Ineos again with Carapaz. Carapaz was on a really small contract at Movistar. And my understanding is, back in Central America, in his home country, he was embarrassed that his contract get out to his home because he won the Giro on a really small contract. And everybody back there thought he was this highly paid superstar when he wasn't getting much paid, getting very well paid at Movistar at all. And then Ineos, they didn't just jump on him and pay him a little bit more. They paid him a lot more to get him. So that was an interesting situation where Movistar really lost out by not actually respecting the result that he did when he was getting paid so little. And I was going to mention, from Johnny spoke about Peter Sagan and Specialized, and a lot of people don't understand that are outside the sport, don't understand sometimes the dynamics of who pays, where sometimes the money comes from. And with Peter, a lot of his contract comes from Specialized. I know that when he went to Bora, that move was made, and behind the scenes of the actual team itself, within the industry of the cycling world. So he had Specialized, and he was also with SRAM at the previous team. And Specialized actually just assumed that SRAM would also chip in money and go to Bora with Sagan. And when Specialized went to SRAM to say, hey, look, you need you guys to chip in half of Peter's contract, they said, well, hang on, no deal was done with us. You didn't even talk to us about it. So Specialized then had to fit the full bill for Sagan's move to Bora, which upset the apple cart a bit, in terms of, the bicycle industry market and what products, what brands Specialized were putting on their bikes. They were a bit pissed off with SRAM because they didn't step up with them. But that whole thing just wasn't managed very well. And it's not just, a team manager or a team owner, general manager has a budget. This is what we're going to pay a rider. A lot of it's coming from outside sources and connections through what bikes put on what products that are in the bike shop that sell the most around the world.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
That's an interesting point. I'm sorry I cut you off.
That's all right, mate. That's my point for the day.
There's like Scott said, there's a lot more things going on behind the scenes with certain riders and nationalities and products, and it's not just a simple contract of we want this guy because he's a good bike rider as well. It's marketing and everything that rolls around selling products.
John, can you turn your phone on silent too, please? Your text message pings were going off.
People, they should be texting you, mate. They're texting me for questions. So Wendy's asked another one. She goes, Matt, do you miss the interaction with the spectators like pre-COVID? So obviously the rules are you can't take food and things like that.
That is one amongst a few there, Jonesy. But I don't know if you saw the vision yesterday of the Giro d'Italia, and it was near on normal crowds yesterday.
Yeah.
Just the difference was a few people had masks on. So we haven't been to a normal. Yesterday was a very well locked off start area because it was easy to do in one square. But I expect to see the crowds back in en masse at this year's Giro, and as long as they stay away from direct exposure to our guys, I certainly haven't got a problem with that. But it's not what it used to be. But at the end of the day, we are still riding through a pandemic over here, and hopefully back in 2022, things will be back to 100% normal.
And speaking of food, mate, what was on the menu last night?
I'll give you one guess.
Pasta.
Pasta. It was a good one too. It was a ravioli last night. But we had. You can't do it. I don't think they do a meal here that hasn't got carbohydrates in it. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's like breakfast is you got no choice. It's either like croissants or cakes, or that's breakfast, and then lunch. When you're at a hotel, if you're not in the race car, it's pasta plus something else, and then dinner. We actually had pizza for lunch yesterday on the site behind the bus. And then we had some beautiful pasta local dish last night. But as always, very nice.
And the cheese wheels are done, aren't they? The big Parmesan cheese wheels.
Yeah, they don't go down too well in a pandemic. The old cheese wheel buffets. No, yeah. You could probably do one for your own team, but certainly not sharing with anyone else.
Yeah.
What are the protocols, Whitey, this year? So compared to last year, which was super strict, and then you guys unfortunately fell foul of the COVID protocols and had to pull out. But for Simon, it was disastrous, and hopefully you can get the better this time. But what are the protocols this year at the Giro compared to last year? Talking about the crowds, we're only an outbreak could happen anytime.
Yeah, look, I think the big issue last year in Europe you could get on a flight without having done any tests. So people were flying around with COVID. So we don't know when Simon contracted the virus, but he didn't feel good after the second day of the race, and the virus does take a few days to get into the system. So we were on flights last year to Sicily on 250 people packed flight. Every single person, every single seat was taken, and no one had been tested except us as people going to the race. So that's a big difference. Travel's a lot safer now. You need a PCR test within 48 hours of getting on any flight. Last year, we're at a hotel where there was a lot of people having holidays still. That was maybe not ideal. And this year as well is where they're adding 2 extra tests. So we've already had a 6-day test coming in, a 3-day test when we arrive. We'll be doing another test tonight. And then an extra 2 tests this week before other tests on both rest days. So there's more testing. There's more testing in the bubble per se at the hotels. They're a lot more strict on people in the same dining areas, and obviously we've got our own protocols with hygiene, limited people on the buses, mask wearing at all times in public when you're not in your own room on your own. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. It's costing a lot of money, but it's well worth the effort.
Iffy, before we let Whitey go.
Yep, I had a bus to catch. In 17 minutes.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think the big difference this time, you're not actually sharing with the fans in the hotel, so I think that's going to make it a lot safer for you.
We're not at the moment, John. But that's hotel number 1. There will be. The thing is, in a lot of these areas, there's still regional restrictions on people can't travel out of their own region unless for work. So if there is people at the hotels, they're usually people who are traveling for work. You need a letter from your employee to travel in most European countries, and certainly to travel in between countries. So, and it's May, it's not tourist season yet, so I don't think the hotels will be too busy. But there will be people, general public, staying at the same hotels, and that's something that the only control we can make is make sure we've got masks on, hand sanitisation, and make sure our eating areas have no one else except people who are inside the bubble inside.
Yeah. All right. Well, all the best for today, Whitey. Stay safe, and hopefully it's a good stage, and we'll check in again tomorrow, mate. Enjoy the uneventful
stage. An uneventful stage is a good stage on a sprint stage when you haven't got a sprinter.
Good stuff, mate. We'll speak to you soon.
Good luck. See you, mate. All right, see you, gents.
See you, mate. Richard and Team Bike Exchange DS, Matt White. It's time now. We're going to have a quick word from our great mates at Bike Exchange, and then we're going to unpack again stage 1, and we'll have a quick preview of stage number 2.
Look at this bike. You think it's just a bike, right? But it's not. It's a bike 374 people are looking at. This guy, this girl, them, all looking at it. People from here, there, and wherever this is. People that are looking for a bike. Or just a piece of it. Amateurs, semi-amateurs, and pro-amateurs. This guy wants this bike, but with this crank and these bars. This could be the perfect match. but not this one. This girl has a bike to sell, and thousands of people might purchase it. Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. His, hers, yours, and the latest data and insights help those businesses keep moving. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, with over 500,000 products and 900 brands, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
Thanks again to our great mates at Bike Exchange. I thought there was a couple of interesting points there. Are you guys a fan of the idea of a salary cap, Scooter?
Look, I think I am in our sport. I don't think we've advanced enough. When we talk about soccer salaries and all those things and what happens with European football, they're talking extraordinary numbers. The players are getting paid. You can say, okay, he's a player worth, 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars. Well, if someone pays that amount, then they're worth it. Like, it doesn't make sense, but if someone pays it, then by justification of that, they are worth that amount of money. We don't need to go to that sort of level. And I think Ineos, not to pick on Ineos, they've got the money to do what they want and buy who they need. And they've had for a number of years now, Mika Kwiatkowski, who was good enough to win a world title, and then since then has been paid a crap load of money to just ride for others. Now, he's had his own opportunities in some races, but in any other team, he would have been out there as the #1 rider in so many races over the last couple of years. He gets paid an enormous amount, and he's happy to do it. And there's a guy who's a world champion. So, someone like Tom Pidcock, obviously he's British, so it's probably great that he's gone to that team, but he's the next superstar out of Britain. Theo Gegenhardt, who won the Giro last year, he's gone to Ineos. They've just got the money to pay whatever they want to get whoever they need to do a job, which is great because they've got that money and they can do that. But I think it just creates an imbalance. And this is not to say that we need to prop up Cofidis that's been struggling forever. I think their management, they've made mistakes over the years anyway. But I think it's probably, pretty good for the sport that maybe we do have some sort of salary cap. That all said, the last year has been incredible racing. And Ineos haven't dominated like they did previously, pre-pandemic. And the racing's been amazing. You throw in Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel, and now Evenepoel coming back, and Pogacar and Hershey and all these young guys. So there's the argument against it. The racing's been amazing. We've got all these young guys that can just come in first, second year pro and still win stuff. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
What do you reckon, Ivy?
Yeah, look, I like it. I like to see the money spread around, but we're not paying football, soccer type monies at the top. So we've got to take a bit of a reality check. There's 3 teams that are dominating as far as that. You've got Ineos, Jumbo-Visma, and the Koenig. They've got huge budgets, but everyone else seems to have been able to spread it around. We're not in a bad place.
We've got a question from Stuart McIntosh. He says, so how much per year are the big wages at Ineos worth for a highly credentialed rider, Scooter?
You should have thrown that to John. I would have been happy to hear him answer this one. Look, I'm not really sure, but you hear that Froome is still the highest paid rider in the world, and he doesn't ride for them anymore. So obviously got paid a lot to go to across to Israel. These guys have to be, over €1 million for the guys that are still working for the guys that are winning. Which in cycling, to John's point, in soccer terms, that's nothing. I remember when I first went to Germany to live as a pro, I went to Dortmund, and the Dortmund team, Borussia Dortmund, were the Bundesliga champions. They got 3 in a row, and the big talk at the time was that every single player was getting paid $1 million, at least $1 million a year, and that was in 1996, 1996, 1997, and it was like, wow, huge money. The lowest paid player in that team was on $1 million. So that's still the sort of money that we're talking about with some of our best guys now. So we're a long way off, those really big money in sports. But hey, it's good. It's good coin. Like, to be a professional athlete, if you just put that aside from the football and the basketball and baseball and NFL, put that aside. To be a sportsman doing something that you love and getting paid, $500,000 to $1.5-2 million a year. That's fantastic money over 5 to 10 to 15 years. It's brilliant, and that's so far outside the realms of the normal working class people. So, yeah, we don't need to get too greedy, I don't think.
Especially if you live in Monaco, you don't have to pay as much tax. It's perfect.
Yeah, but the Sagard's
Yeah.
supposedly on €4 million, so it's fairly big money. Yeah.
All right, predictions for the
not bad.
stage. Jason Cruz, he could be on the money. Caleb for the win tonight, not a lot of win. George looked strong in the TT, and that's George Bennett, obviously, and seemed to take not too many risks in the corners. Whitey already mentioned wet weather forecast for tomorrow. You think anyone's going to roll Caleb?
On paper,
Caleb's my pick, but Gaviria, he's starting to come up. Groenewegen, it'd be interesting to see how he goes. He is a super sprinter. He looks pretty big. I was looking at him in that time trial last night. He's pretty wide. He's got huge legs, but nothing's changed from where he was last year. So I think he'll be definitely a threat. It'll be a great one to watch. I think that Caleb has the best lead-out team, it'll be a great one to watch. My money's on Caleb.
Johnny, it'll be interesting to see, to actually just, when they do the helicopter shot, hopefully they do the last kilometre in replay, and just to really watch Groenewegen in particular, just how he handles the peloton and whether he just goes straight back to not the way he was, but, sprinters, you can't be intimidated as a sprinter. I remember the Baden Cook telling a story of, what was his name? Pataki, Alessandro Pataki. He did an interview in Gazzetta or a magazine or something, and said that he was honest about the fact that in the last 5 kilometres of a sprint stage, even if he wins it, he's still really nervous and quite scared in the last 5Ks because it's so hectic, so dangerous. And he was super quick and he won lots of races, an enormous number of races, but he actually admitted that he did have fear in the last 5Ks. And Cookie read that and thought, thank you, Alessandro. So whenever he raced him from then on, he hit him extra hard, rode past him close, bumped his handlebars, put the shoulder into him as much as he could in the last 5Ks to put the shits up him, to make him more scared coming into the finish to try and get an advantage of him. Now,
the Cookie did that to everyone.
He did. He did that going to dinner.
Yeah.
In the queue at Macca's, mate.
Yeah.
But it just will be interesting to see, how he is in the sprint stage now after what's happened. Everyone's going to be looking at him. Is he going to be intimidated? Is he going to be a little bit, timid? Or is it just going to be, the Groenewegen of old that wants to win, like a sprinter has to be? It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, and Gaviria, as you said, Johnny, it's contract year, and he hasn't had form for year and a half now. He had the COVID, but it's going to be interesting.
He'll be awesome. It's contract
yeah.
year.
Yeah,
and Sagard in there. He did a really good sprint only last week in Romandy, so he was in there with the sprinters. So I reckon he'll be up there. Viviani and Nizzolo. Nizzolo will be right in the mix. He's pretty quick and European champion as well.
Scooter, how do you think all the recent stuff with Groenewegen and the reports from Jakobsen saying that, he hasn't taken ownership for the crash and all the attention that's got on the eve of the Giro. How do you reckon he's going to respond?
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? It could go either way. It could be just a bit too timid, and you can't be hesitant in a sprint of a Grand Tour. So if he doesn't push through the gap to get in the right position to go for the sprint, he's not going to have a chance. So that may be weighing on him. We're not going to know until we get through this first sprint stage. Everybody has fresh legs. It's going to be quite hectic. There is only the one team everyone's going to be looking at to do the final lead out, which is Lotto. They may then be forced to go too early, and then it gets even messier, if they can't control it right down to the end. And that could be really challenging, in a messy sprint to see how Groenewegen handles it. Or he could just bounce back and say, well, hang on. He knows whether he's taken ownership of it or not. And he and Jakobsen have had a conversation off air that then unfortunately, became public, which wasn't supposed to. But it'll just be really interesting to see how he bounces back. And no one knows. No one knows until we see how he handles himself today.
I think it's a bit rough. Look, Groenewegen, all he said was that they sat down and talked. He didn't really disclose what they talked about. So I don't know what the real issue is here. Groenewegen has said many times that he was sorry, that he was, through a hook. He's been overly criticised here. The biggest damage was not what Groenewegen did. It was the terrible, the Polish setup of that stage, very dangerous downhill stage finish, and it wasn't the actual barricades weren't good enough, and they had a gap right where he went into the thing and went through and hit the actual finish structure. That was very, very bad. That wasn't Dylan Groenewegen's fault.
Yeah, and look, it could be a case that Dylan, feels that he has taken ownership, and he did say that in his conversations with Fabio. But Fabio, it was such a horrific accident that he just may not accept that. No matter what, who knows? But we're just speculating. But no matter what Groenewegen says, he just may not accept that he's taken full responsibility for it. And that might just for Fabio to understand, perhaps.
Yeah. A couple more questions before we go, fellas. Annette, she might have some mail here, folks. Rumour is that Luke Plapp has signed with Ineos for $1.5 million. Any truth in the rumour?
I don't know about 1.5. And that would be, if it is, it's over multiple years. Okay, so that would be 1.5 per year. But I have an understanding that a deal may have definitely been done for an extraordinary amount of money. Yeah, I don't know what the figures may be, but yeah.
Well, I hear UAE in the end actually offered him a fraction more, but he took a little bit less, which I think is around about 1.5 to go to Ineos, because that's where he was happier with the way they were going to let him prepare, and very happy with their structure for the time trial for him, because that's what he really believes he is going to be.
And the connection to Richie, which obviously that was. The whole point was Richie, helping him organise that deal after riding with him at the Tour Down Under this year, as part of that mixed team, the national team. So, he's got a connection with a friendship with Richie now, and that's where he wants to go. And you've got also Rowan Dennis there, that's also a former track rider, and Luke does want to still do track. He wants to come back and forth and still do the Madison in particular, if he can, after these Olympics. And remember, look, it's only. Commonwealth Games don't seem to have the same sort of status as they used to, but the Com Games are only next year, so it's only 1 year away from Com Games. Luke's still young, so I don't think Ineos would be buying him and expecting him to win things straight away. They'd be happy to, but he may still be able to come back and do Com Games next year, or maybe Track Worlds for the Madison if he makes that 2-man split. And then we're only now 3 years away from the next Olympic Games, and he's young enough to do those. So, I think the connection with Rowan, with Richie, and obviously a good connection with the management there is you'll take. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we always talk about, this guy was offered so much more here, but he didn't take it. Why? It's not just money that riders use.
And look, I wonder. I just wonder the fact that he was UAE were very strong, and then that Alan Piper not being so well and not going to be involved with the team so much next year. Was that a factor? I don't know.
Well, they did a study I heard on the radio the other day. Someone investigated why certain athletes perform and why some don't. And it was all about, your ability to handle stress and all that sort of stuff. But a big thing that came out is environment, and how you, in your mental state, if you're happy in your environment, you're going to perform better. And, I think we're seeing that shift even from talking to Brailsford last year about trying to make things a little bit more fun and not as robotic and as not, regimented. So, that obviously be more of an appeal for riders going across as well. So now Samantha's done a bit of research for us. Froome will earn 5.5 million euros this year. Wow. Sagan and Pogacar next at 5 million. Geez, that's not bad bank.
No, not bad.
That's good,
that's the sort of figures.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's expecting. Look, I would like to see Froome, competitive to whatever level, podium at the Tour or something, just to kind of like what Cavendish has been desperate to do this year. And he picked up his 4 wins in Turkey. He was just trying to finish his career with some wins on a high, and that was his own little, mental thing and ego thing and status. And I understand that. And I think Froome is trying to do the same thing. He wants to get back to his best. That crash was extraordinarily bad. It's taken him so long. I was watching in Romandy like the other week. There were, along the final climb, you had Rowan. Rowan was driving it when the attack started coming, and Rowan was setting tempo for the peloton. Just before that happened, there was about 60 riders still left in the peloton. Froome was sitting dead last and really starting to struggle. As soon as the acceleration started at the front, Froome was dropped. Now, it's been a long time since he crashed, and yet he's still not in the best 60 in a mountain stage at the Tour of Romandy. So he's got a long way to go. But yeah, that's an extraordinary amount of money for someone that's probably not going to win a big race again. And I actually hope he does, but I can't see it at this stage.
I don't know if he'll win the Tour de France again, but I do think that that by next year he will become competitive. I do believe that. I believe he will. I don't know if he'll win the Tour de France again, but I believe he will become competitive again.
Yep. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Final question or statement from Sally. Thanks, Dan and John, for the show and bringing us insights from Whitey and Scooter. No worries at all. So Caleb Ewan tonight. That's our tip, boys.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Put the money on him. Yeah.
Any more on the Giro, or can we come back to domestically? Because we had another big race in Australia yesterday that I was working on, the Grafton.
Oh yeah,
I was about to ask you, mate. One of my favourite bike races, the Grafton to Inverell.
It is a cracker. Well, because the Melbourne to Warrnambool was last week, and that's that's the second oldest one-day road race in the world, and Australia's most prestigious one-day race. Yet the Grafton is the harder of the two. It's definitely, in terms of terrain, it's a tougher race. Warrnambool was 267 k's long, Grafton 228, but it goes up the Gibraltar Range, lots of hills, ups and downs. Once you get up onto the range, it's it doesn't descend. Like, it stays up there at elevated and just up and down all the way into the finish. Yeah. So really, really tough. And Rudy Porter from Inform TMX make come away with the win. Young guy, another young guy on the scene. Breakaway went, after the Gibraltar Range. So over half of the race was, 5 riders in front, and he popped away from them at the end, about 8 k's to go, 4 k's into Inverell, won the stage ahead of Sam Hill from Nero Continental, local team. And it was his brother Ben that was second last week in the Warnie. Sam riding for a different team, second this week in the Grafton. And third was Ryan Kavanagh with the St George team. And the peloton just behind, 28 seconds or so back. And one of the biggest fields, actually, we've seen for a while coming in towards Inverell. They didn't drive it up the Gibraltar Range, which was really interesting. So a very large group got over the top of the climb before that group went away. But that's the Grafton Inverell, mate, for another year. 60th.
So I tried to. So how did the streaming go? I tried to get onto the streaming. I just couldn't seem to connect.
But there's no streaming.
That's why I couldn't connect.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And I should have told you, just keep refreshing the page, but there was no page to refresh, mate. Sorry. But in that region, unlike the Warnie, the streaming for the Warnie was great last week, because there's just
absolutely
some cool towers down there.
Yeah.
One really dark dead patch in the middle of it, but for Grafton Inverell, once you get up over the range, there's not much coverage at all. So they didn't even bother to do that, unfortunately. But look, it was a cracking race, and it was the 60th edition. It was the first time they had the women's race as well. It started over the top of the range, so they didn't actually go up the Gibraltar Range, which I'm odds about that, because that's what the race is about, is splitting the field up the range. But they couldn't have gone all the way through to the finish had they done the range. It was too long. I think it was 240 k's for them anyway. But Alan Grindle, who was the inaugural winner of the Grafton 60 years ago, was there. So he did the start and the finish, which was great. And Ruby Roseman Gannon won the women's race. Her first coach was Alan Grindle, who was obviously there at the finish. So that was a great little moment at the end for the inaugural winner of the women's race to be reunited with her first coach, Alan Grindle, who was the winner of the first race itself 60 years ago. It's a great moment.
That's
That's
awesome.
great. It used to be when I rode, it was sponsored by Suzuki, and I got fastest time in 70 and 71, and won a couple of motorbikes. I remember it really well.
Did you?
That's
What'd you
great.
do with
How'd you
those?
How'd you ride both of those back?
Yeah.
I upgraded one. It was a little step through 100, and I paid a bit extra and got a 150, which we used to use for motor pace training. And I think I sold the second one, made a couple of bucks. If I remember
Traded
rightly.
for beer and darts.
All of that.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to split money.
very-
You didn't have to split the money with anyone, John. Not riding in a team or something.
Sorry, mate.
You didn't have to. Split
No, I
the
didn't
money
have
with
all of
others?
the first year. I just got back from the Com Games, and I was absolutely knackered. I had jet lag and whatever, and I only just made it to the finish, but won the kick, beat Donnie Allen, who wasn't too happy, and I think we had to split it up. Although I kept the motorbike, but the second year I dropped the scratch bunch up the Gibraltar Range, and I had a team time trial with a bloke named Ray Piper, who was a very good bike runner, won the Aussie road title that year. And we did a team a time trial for 100 mile, 150. I think it's 150k to go from the top of the Gibraltar Range. So it was a very interesting bike race. I didn't have to split with anybody. It was good stuff. One out, mate. One out.
Good on
No,
you, Johnny.
Hang on. What about the guy you time trialed with? You didn't split it with
Well,
him?
he didn't catch. I dropped him. He was chasing me, so I didn't have to split with him, mate.
But he helped you keep the
He was
bunch away.
chasing me. He was chasing me for what is it, 150 mile? It was nearly 200k, wasn't it, from the top of the Gibraltar Range, whatever it was. But he wasn't with me. He never caught me, mate.
Unreal.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, thanks, fellas, for the insights today. We'll be back again tomorrow night for another repacking of the sprint stage and looking ahead to stage number 3. And yeah, we're looking forward to the coverage again on SBS tonight. So stay tuned for that. And
Should be great.
we'll be back again soon. Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
This is the winning ride of the Tour de France.